So, you want to be a musician? My name's Mike Vaccaro. I have some suggestions for you on purchasing an instrument and finding a teacher and the study of music. Did you hear somebody play and it was so intimate to you that it touched you and that's why you want to play? That's a good reason. Are your parents keeping you busy so you don't get in trouble? That is, it's like a golf lesson and karate lesson and swimming lessons, and then they just add music lessons to keep you busy. That's not a very good reason, and you won't stay involved long, most likely. You want to play for fun with your friends? That's a good reason. Do you want to be a professional musician? That's probably early for you to know that, but that's a good reason. And are you just generally charmed when you hear music? When you hear music in the house, when you go out and you hear music in the car, maybe you go to a concert, are you charmed by it? If you are, that's a good reason to be a musician, whether it's at the amateur level or the professional level. Either level, there's a lot to be learned, and there's a lot to have as a good feeling about music. The thing about practice is you have to be practiced to be good, and the more you practice, the better you get. And here's the thing about getting better. The better you get, the more seasoned musicians you play with, and the more fun it is. Because you're better, they're better, you're not struggling as much, and you can really make music instead of just notes. So what now? If you're young, really young, like 3, 4, 5, maybe even 6, I would suggest that you start on the piano, because the piano is one of the basic instruments of music. And you have 10 fingers, you can play 10 notes. On a single note instrument, you can play 1 note. So at the beginning, if you have a keyboard to look at, you can see what your fingers are doing. And you might even be able to press A a lot of times and learn where that is in your ear and develop perfect pitch just by looking at your hands. It's a little harder on an instrument where you're just playing 1 note. Most of us use relative pitch. Once we hear a note, we can pick out the other notes just by experience on our instrument. So just remember, piano is a master instrument. Another reason to start with the piano is the student might be so young that they really can't hold the instrument that they want to play. Somebody comes into me that's 3 or 4 years old and says, I want to play alto sax. They can't play alto sax. They're too small. Their hands are too small, their body's too small, the instrument's very heavy. You put it around your neck starts getting in a funny arch. Especially at that age where your tissues are very soft, it's not a really good idea. So the younger you are, the more you want to start piano for a few years. And then after a few years, you take the single instrument you want to play. Let's say you always wanted to play the violin. Well, that's the time to take the violin, or the saxophone, or the trumpet, or the drums, or whatever it is. But keep a little touch with the piano your whole life. And I think if you do the piano for 2 or 3 years, you'll do that anyway. Music is based on something called the chromatic scale, and that's the alphabet of music. Now, if you're just speaking, and I ask you to say the alphabet, you could go A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, Z. You can't do that on an instrument yet, can you? Okay, so the first thing you want to learn is a chromatic scale. However, it's not much fun to learn. So we have to find another way to learn. Having the piano with you teaches you to see the chromatic scale and how 2 half steps equal a whole step. Like there's a C and there's a D. There's a black note in between those 2 notes. So if you sharp the C, which raises it a half step, you get a C sharp. If you flat the D, it becomes a D flat. Both C sharp and D flat are the same note because they're the black note in between C and D. This is just a sample of why it's easier to look at the piano and be able to do this. The students that come to me that don't have any experience on the piano and really don't even want to look at it have a very, very hard time with this idea of the chromatic scale being the alphabet of music. Now, that may be a little ahead of you right now, but I'm just letting you know that the piano is an easier way to go to start with if you're very young. Now, if you're 7, 8, or 9, I suggest you start your orchestral instrument, but also alternate weeks with a piano teacher. And then you get a little bit of both, and the piano will be so helpful to you. I didn't take the piano ever in my life, and I'm sorry. It's been a loss to my musical life. I've bridged the gap anyway, but it made my life harder. So everybody that I know that can play the chromatic scale on a piano or look at the piano and play simple chords is better off as a musician. Okay, so I'm giving you this information on the basis of being 75 years young and teaching students of all ages, a lot of beginners and a few people that have become professional musicians. So I hope you take my advice seriously about the piano and your other instrument. So, you've decided you want to become a musician, and the big day comes. You have to buy an instrument. Where do you go? How much do you pay? Who do you believe? You and your parents likely don't know what kind of an instrument you're looking for. They know how much money they want to spend, and a lot of times that's not very much because they want to see if you're really interested. So they'll buy a rental instrument, and that can be a good instrument, and it could be not so good of an instrument, and that might determine whether you're going to be a musician or not. I remember that my parents rented me a clarinet when I was young, and I played it for a while, and it just wouldn't work. One day I got so incensed that I threw the thing on the clarinet. I pounded it on the clarinet on the bed like that, and I broke it in half. And so my parents decided to get me a good instrument. So they bought me a buffet clarinet. At that time, a buffet clarinet cost $125. Well, they cost a lot more now, but then $125 was a lot of money. But it was worth the investment because now I was interested. Now I wanted to practice instead of wondering why every time I tried to practice it didn't work. Still didn't know about mouthpieces or reeds or any of the other accessories, and most band instruments usually require some kind of alteration to fit you. It might be corks on the side of the key so you can reach them quicker. It might be some tuning. They didn't tune it at the factory quite right. Your teacher can help you with all that. What I suggest to you is that you go to a place that specializes in the instrument that you want to play. Where I live, we have a place that specializes in woodwinds, clarinets, saxophones, flutes, and oboes, and bassoons. And they have people there that know about the instruments. So when they hand you an instrument to play, chances are you're going to get a better instrument than going to a large music store where you may be buying your clarinet from a tuba player, or your violin from a tuba player, or your tuba from a piccolo player. So you want a place that specializes in the instrument you play, not just your corner music store, unless they have somebody that can really help you there. Now the people that can help you there are first the teachers that work there. You have to keep in mind that they probably want to sell something because they're going to get a commission from the owner, but maybe not. Yeah, you'll be able to tell that. The next best way is to have a repair person help you by the instrument, and they know how long an instrument's going to last, by their experience from working on the keys and the pads, and if maybe it's a bow if you're a violin player or whatever. Uh, and I guess the really best way is if you know a professional musician that plays the instrument that you want. They'll tell you the truth. And you may even want to study with that person. Um, so we'll get into teachers in a moment. So let's remember the preferred option is to buy your instrument from a store that specializes in the instrument you play. That's the most important thing. Always buy the best instrument that you can afford. Now, what's best? That's, another question. But if you have somebody with you that's trained, they'll tell you what's best. And they'll tell you what's best in that store that day. So if you can afford it, buy the best you can. If you buy a professional quality instrument, you'll be able to sell it for about the same price that you bought it for or more. If I bought a flute 20 years ago, it's probably worth 5 times more than I paid for it. If I bought a student instrument, it's worth 5 times less than I paid for it. So always buy the best you can afford. A professional instrument is best. Now, here's something else you want to consider. If a professional can't play on a student instrument, how can a student? Does that make sense? I'm going to say it again. If a professional can't play on a student instrument, what chance does a student have? There's a lot of good student instruments out there, and if you get a good one, you're going to be okay. But if you don't get a good one, you're going to wish you bought a professional instrument. So now, the next thing you need to do is pick a teacher. The first thing to assume is that the internet shouldn't be your only choice of a teacher. You need a person. I'm not saying the internet can't help you. I'm not saying there isn't little tricks the internet has, but to only study from the internet, I believe, is less than you owe yourself. So get a teacher, and it's like golf. If you go play golf, you have a teacher, they're teaching you something, and then you go on the course, and you're playing with 3 other people. Every one of those 3 other people thinks they're your teacher. They all have something to say to you about your swing, of course, unless they're worse than you are. So, especially if you're playing with strangers, they'll love to tell you how to play. So once you pick a teacher, listen to what your teacher says, do what they say. If it doesn't work for you after a few months, you can change teachers. But you have to be loyal to your teacher. You have to trust your teacher. You have to know that your teacher knows what they're talking about. My first teacher was Johnny the Barber, and he taught at the music store a couple of nights a week. Probably not your best choice. However, even in big music stores, sometimes they get really good teachers. So there's one place you can go to find a teacher. Another place to go to find a teacher is the local symphony, the local chamber orchestra, the college near you, someone you may know, or somebody that knows somebody, somebody that you've heard at the Civic Light Opera, somebody you've heard anywhere, really. And if they're playing the kind of music you want, that's who should be your teacher. Now, some people want to be jazz players, some people want to be rock and roll players, some people want to be symphonic players. That's another thing that enters into your choice. So, if you're gonna want to be a rock and roll player, go out and hear some rock and roll bands, and when you find somebody that really sounds good to you, see if they'll take you as a student. Symphonic, it's a little different. It's a harder road of study. So it's best to go to one of the higher end places like a college or a conservatory or an orchestra or something like that. And chamber musicians are great too. After 3 or 4 months of study, you're going to know if that teacher is right for you. Just by how you get along, how patient they are with you, I had a teacher once that liked to pound on my leg when the time wasn't right, and that wasn't a very nice experience. And so it's important that you have the right teacher, and because you have the right teacher, you owe it to them to practice. That's your part of it. The teacher's job is to teach you, and your job is to learn. So don't take it lightly. Practice every day. My rule is to practice 1 minute a day, and then see how many minutes more you can play after that. Okay, so there's also the band director as a teacher at your elementary school, your junior high school, or your high school. The problem with band directors is they have a specialty instrument, say it's a trumpet, and then when they're in college, they take what's called teaching classes. And so they'll take the woodwinds, and they'll take clarinet, saxophone, flute, oboe, and bassoon, and they'll study those for 16 weeks. They'll get some basics, probably not enough to take you very far. They'll be the first one to suggest that you get a private teacher because they want the assistance of the teacher as well. So, in learning music, IQ, acclimation, and desire is always important if you want to stay in music. Having said that, perfect pitch and perfect recall are ever so helpful, but so few people have that. I wouldn't count on that. If you have it, consider yourself the luckiest person in the world, and I hope you stick with music if you have that. I always had to practice more than everybody else, so for me, my trick was the work ethic. So if I knew everybody else was practicing an hour, I'd have to practice an hour and a half. And I usually sat first chair and everything, but it was work. It wasn't all well. I just play a little bit and see what happens. The next thing I want you to remember is how huge music is. No matter what you do, you're never going to learn music completely. There's ethnic music, classical music, jazz music, rock and roll music, swing music, pop music, the blues, country music, easy listening music. I'm sure you can add things to that list. However you want to play, you do have to learn the basics, and I suggest, again, that you have a private teacher to teach you those basics, and it's a private teacher that does what you want to do. If you don't know what you want to do, go to a classical teacher. That's my 2 cents, or a jazz teacher. Okay, so they seem to have the most insight to what you're looking for. Did I say electronic music? Crossover music? There's so many different kinds of music. And now that you have an instrument, you understand the enormity of music, and have a teacher, you can get to practice. This is important, I'll say it again. You have to play at least 1 minute every day. And what you do is you sit down in the place that you practice, and it's best if you practice at the same time and in the same place every day. You sit down, you take your instrument out. You may have to wet a reed, tighten a bow, whatever you have to do to get your instrument ready. And then you sit in the quiet and you let all the thoughts of the day go by. What somebody said to you, something else you're trying to learn that's hard, and like out here, the planes are going overhead, you try and forget that. You let everything go and study only what you're looking at, the music, or what you're playing in your head. So we start with 1 minute. If you can do 2 minutes, that's good. If you can do 5 minutes, that's better. If you can do 10 minutes, that's good. As you get better, if you can do 15, 20, 30 minutes, that's good. When you get in high school, if you can do an hour a day or 2 hours a day, that's good. Not good enough to be a soloist, but good enough to probably be in the music business. okay? And, of course, when you're in college, you have to practice several hours a day, and I would say at some point before you become a professional, you probably have to spend 3 to 12 months, 3 to 5 hours a day, just to solidify everything that you need to know. Now, that doesn't mean you graduated, because in music you never graduate. There's always something new to learn. But the chances are you'll be really good. So you can almost teach yourself. I remember the best teacher I ever had was the teacher that let me go from studying anymore. I was an oboe player with the Philharmonic, and I went and I'd been I was, what was I? I was about 26, 27, and I was still studying privately with Luella Howard in Los Angeles. I was living in Las Vegas at the time, and driving to Los Angeles every Monday night and taking a lesson and driving back. And I was playing oboe too. And after Vegas, I went to this oboe teacher, and I played for him. And he looked at me and says, "Well, he says, you have the same problems I do. He says, you should go take lessons from everybody in town and see who's willing to help you get a job because you're good enough." Well, that was a great lesson because I was dismissed as a student. Now, we never dismiss ourselves as a student, but having the idea that somebody else dismissed me made me look at my practicing different. I was responsible for my practicing. The teacher was responsible for my practicing. I knew phrasing by then. I knew how to practice. I knew what to practice, and I practiced every day. I still do. I'm 75 years old, and I practice 2-3 hours a day and do a couple of CDs a year. I'm retired, but for me it's a religion. For me it's a religion. I just do it every day. If I don't do it a day, I kind of have a crummy day and get mad at myself and feel like I'm less than I should be. So for me it's a religion. It might not be for you. You just might want to play in the city's concert band where you live, or the city's orchestra where you live, and not play at a really high level. And that's great, because you still have the knowledge of music and the appreciation of music. And the appreciation of music is the most important thing, and that's what will make you be better. Make your first note. We talked about being quiet and preparing and getting rid of all the thoughts. After that, make your first note the best note of the day. Okay, and make it that way your whole life. And what that's going to do, it's going to center you. And if you're playing in an orchestra, or if you're playing a concert and you have a little solo, the first note's what everybody hears. So get really used to making the first note a wonderful note. Another thing regarding practicing, please don't let the stimulation of life, television, the internet, your parents, your friends, anything else enter into your practice, especially the television. Though you need some talent or affinity to play, it's what you do with that affinity or talent that controls your destiny. How hard are you willing to work? That's the bottom line. Now don't forget to listen to music, because if you don't listen to music, and I mean dedicated listening, like turn your stereo on and sit in front of it and follow a score, or just close your eyes and listen, it's not going to work as well, because you won't have a concept of what you're supposed to sound like. It would be like an English teacher that didn't want to read a book. I mean, that doesn't seem right. And like for me, not listening doesn't seem right. In fact, if I'm going to play, say, like a Brahms clarinet sonata, I'll listen to 10 different people if I can find the recordings, and for that piece, obviously you can. Other pieces you may or may not, and I've always, on all my CDs, I've always had somebody write an original piece of music, sometimes two, sometimes half the CD. So, of course, there's no one to listen to except for yourself in that situation. But on any piece of the standard literature, there's somewhere that you can hear it, especially these days. You know, there's radio stations, there's CDs, there's YouTube, there's Spotify, I don't even know how many things there are, you know. I don't keep up with that, but I do listen to as much music as I can. And what that teaches you is not only to listen to music, but to listen to life. Listen to what people say. Don't comment on it, don't argue with them, but listen to what they say and see if it makes sense to you, because everybody's trying to tell a story, and they want you to believe their story. And a good friend of mine, Sandy Pringle, has something. He's a journalist like I am. We like to journal things that we see that we like, and we both have thick books of, you know, quotes that people made. And his quote, the quote that he likes most, he has it on his email, is, "Your opinion is not necessarily my truth." So listening makes you think about what's true rather than just believe what anybody's going to tell you. So always consider what people say. Be quiet, don't argue with them. Think about it, see if that works for you. So music and journaling help you make decisions based on truth. Because those little things you write down are usually things that you think are the truth, or think are funny, which is usually a form of the truth told a different way. So if nothing I've said to you makes any sense, just get in your old horn, start playing, and gut it out. If you stay with it, you'll figure it all out on your own. But it takes a lot longer, because a teacher, when you're taking the path and moving the path off where you're supposed to go, the teacher will bring you right back to the path. Save you a lot of time. You come to the teacher and say, "Oh, look what I just learned." The teacher will know that it's not right for what you're supposed to do. They'll gently bring you back to where you're supposed to be. Okay? So again, if you don't like what I said and want to gut it out, that's another way to learn. That's my thinking on starting music, and thanks for taking the time to watch the video. I appreciate it. Have a good day and night.